Hello and welcome, or welcome back to Half Moon. I am Kaylee, I'm your host, and I am so happy to welcome you to Half Moon Academy. We are a virtual school of conscious creation, understanding our own influence on our own local reality. So we talk about all things philosophy, esoteric studies, spirituality, science, biochemistry, all of it. Because we actually know that the reason we're so separated is because information has become so hyper specialized, and we need to merge it together in order to draw the connections and see the pattern and the truth that intersects all planes of existence. One of the main themes we talk about here is Hermeticism. But today, I guess it's a little bit different. Maybe it's a little bit different, maybe it's the same. I want to talk a little bit more practically and kind of give like a sort of advice podcast about how to build your legacy. And your legacy, if you don't know, this is your purpose. Because you're not just a physical body, you are an eternal soul. And your eternal soul evolves through the evolution of your mind, which occurs through understanding your subconscious mind, bringing the unconscious into conscious, deconstructing that, and learning these spiritual lessons. You will not learn any spiritual lesson, though, if you're not following the path. Are you paying attention to the path, or are you ignoring what's in front of you, what is right before your eyes? I'm going to break this down and really explain to you how you can align with your purpose, how you can find your purpose, and also, before we even get into that, understanding that purpose is different for everybody. We're going to be understanding this all the way from knowing who you are and how to even know who you are, and then from the fulfillment of your purpose, which is just maintaining alignment with your higher self and your soul. So if you like this podcast, if you've been resonating already, maybe, and you have a little extra time, go ahead and, if you don't mind, leave a 5-star review. It really helps support the podcast. And honestly, after the episode, if you have any questions or something else you feel like I didn't touch on, go ahead and leave a comment, and I'd love to talk to you about that too. And before we get into the episode, there's still time. I'm doing a live free spiral seminar, which will be about roughly an hour long on February 12th in the evening in the United States time. And then it'll be Monday afternoonish in Australia. I think it'll be the middle of the night in Europe, so I don't know if this one's for you, but it will also be recorded. So actually, it's kind of for everybody. Go ahead, and if you haven't already, sign up at the link in the show notes, and you'll get a confirmation email that you're in. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the intro, and let's go ahead and get into the episode today. We talk a lot on this podcast about this idea that within everything is the seed of everything. This idea that founded the ancient alchemists, that tied them together. It was a philosophical framework that you could turn lead into gold. You could turn any base metal into gold through a series of processes by understanding that the seed of gold is already existing within the lead. So by nature, the alchemists would view lead, they would view base metals, and they would witness the seed of gold inside of the lead, and then they would apply alchemy in order to change it. It wasn't like you're changing something into something that it isn't by brute force. Instead, it's you're acknowledging the seed of that thing already within it, and then that allows it to become gold. Does that make sense? We already talk about that a lot. I also talk about this idea of rational optimism. It's actually logical to be optimistic right now, because we talk about this idea, again, that your brain, your subconscious mind, is filtering through 10 to 11 million bits of information every single second, but it's only consciously aware of 50 to 60 of those bits. Who you are, how you act, everything that you do in this world, everything you see in this world is ultimately a construct and a neural loop that you've created. It's a way that your brain is used to activating. You're used to filtering all this information that you're seeing every single second and then seeing it in a very narrow and a very specific way. Now, what that has led us to do is we create these sort of metaphorical cages for ourselves. So I like to think about it in two ways. First, in your own mind, you have your own cage that you've created through your constructs, through your unconscious beliefs. And then at the same time, you have another cage. Maybe this cage is from your family. Outside of that cage, you have another cage, which is society at large. So you, in this sort of metaphor, you exist in a cage of your own making within another larger cage. What you have to do here is you have to understand where are the bars of those cage. And when it's the cage you've made, it is your job and only your job to deconstruct the cage that you have created. Before I even get into the idea of legacy, we need to get something straight. So that's why we're just jumping into it right now. We need to understand when I'm talking to you about the subconscious mind and making the unconscious conscious, like we always say that quote from Carl Jung, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You think that you're living in this fated world, which to some degree you actually are, which we'll circle back to, but ultimately you exist as this sort of externalized expression of a cage of your own making through your constructs that you've either created or you've internalized from something outside of you. We also could kind of go layers deeper and say that epigenetically, which means that the part of your DNA that's expressed or not expressed, your epigenetics actually change and they're passed down to you based on your ancestors, which means that you're also inheriting the trauma of your ancestral line. We could keep going with this and say maybe if you believe that you have past lives or multiple lifetimes, you're inheriting energy from that. So honestly, right now, I'm not totally sure. I mean, I personally do believe we've lived past lives, but I also think there's something to be said about your own genetic lineage and the fact that maybe these two things are layered on top of each other. Maybe you are unraveling the layers of your genome, your epigenetics, and you're processing through the traumas of your ancestors with your physical body now, but simultaneously you have these own inscriptions on your soul and your higher self that kind of allow you to have to go deeper into what is it exactly that your unconscious mind believes. What haven't you worked through? That's your cage, okay? So what does it mean to build a legacy? First, we need to understand your location in a cage within a cage, and the fact that once you become aware of the cage and you're looking around and you're seeing the world for what it truly is right now, it can be very easy to get demoralized. I myself sometimes feel demoralized, and I don't want to use any sort of spiritual bypassing or escapism to pretend like I don't. I do. I see what's happening, and I know right and wrong. And I also know that I carry a unique amount of privilege, that every single person carries their own amount of privilege, and it is your responsibility to take the privilege that you have and then do something with it. I didn't expect to kind of go into this in this episode, but let's go ahead and just be honest. And the reason I'm honest on my podcast is because, first of all, if you listen to my podcast, you're a real one. You know what I mean? Like, haters come on TikTok and they just scroll to your video and they leave something rude. Your podcast is different. Like, the odds that somebody that actually despises me is listening to this is way slimmer than something on the internet. And then the second bigger reason actually is because the things that I've gone through are so normal, and we pretend like sociologically that they're not. Like when we're in society, we're like, oh, well, we just kind of brush past those collectively. We pretend like these things aren't true. But the truth is, I, from a very, very young age, had a lot of intelligence and critical thought, which led me to become severely depressed at a very, very young age. The first time I tried to exit the video game early was when I was only 10 years old, and I struggled with depression on and off throughout my life until my early/mid-20s. When I was 20, I was actually medicated for my depression, and I had this one summer where I was working in a research lab in microbiology. And sometimes I would have to go ahead and plate some cells and wait for them to grow, or do something without getting too into the science, where basically it would take a set amount of hours and I would just have to wait, and I would, in that free time, I would read papers and do things. But then sometimes if I had a lot of extra time and I finished all my work in the lab, I would drive over to Lake Michigan, which was only 15 minutes away, and I would go to this very remote beach where there was nobody. And I would go and I would do yoga, and then I would run, and then I would literally swim naked in the lake and then meditate on the shore. And through that summer, just doing that practice again and again and again, and reading books about meditation and what we're actually doing here. That was actually the summer I read the book Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, if you're familiar with it. I understood myself beyond the framework of religion. I think you've heard maybe my episode that's like my spiritual journey or my awakening or something like that. And I talk about the fact that when I was 16, I became a Christian, and I really took this on, like, this religion completely independently of like how it was practiced, and I made it my own. And when I was 20, this is when I kind of actually started branching a little bit away from that and from these really rigid constructs, because more so I was like, I don't know, I'm kind of getting into a tangent again, but it's like I became a Christian at 16, and I was like, okay, so you guys believe that this is the perfect, infallible, God-breathed, like, word of God, like the Bible? And they'd be like, yeah. And I was like, okay, well, have you read it? Have you read it all front to back? And over 9 times out of 10, people would say no. Honestly, I would say like 99 times out of 100, people would say no. The vast majority of Christians don't actually read their whole book front to back. I became a Christian when I was 16, so I was like, I'm going to see what this thing says, right? So I read the entire thing front to back, and while there is so much wisdom and metaphors and actually really horrifying, gruesome things as well, a lot of questions about the life and like the world and actually how to live and how to embody your spirituality are completely not present in the book. Like, it answers a lot of questions. It speaks very potently about human nature, but it doesn't answer like, okay, like, then what? Like, what do I do? I'm going to be clear, like, there are a lot of answers, right? There are like certain things, I'm getting into a tangent here again, but it's like, the thing that bothers me right now about like American Protestant Christians is like, they take the not literal parts of the Bible, like the things that are clearly metaphors and had been practiced as metaphors for most of history, and they take that literally, but then they take the things that are literal and then they make them metaphorical. Like, I don't think that Jesus was talking metaphorically when he said, it's better for you to pluck out your eye than lust at a woman. He also says, like, you know how Christians like sometimes will fundraise for mission trips and things like that? Jesus literally says to his disciples, like, explicitly, don't raise money, go with what you have and trust that you'll be provided for. Like, things like that are really funny. But I do think he speaks in metaphors so that the wisdom can only be accessed by those who are in connection with the divine. And I do really strongly value the teachings of Jesus, and they are still teachings that I really strongly resonate with today. But that being said, that summer was the first time where I was finally, after my conversion to Christianity, branching a little bit out. And that's, like I said, I began meditating regularly. And it came to me in that time that the reason that I had struggled so intensely with depression for so much of my life was because I had never fully grieved or acknowledged myself for who I really was. So that summer, I let myself cry, and I actually ended up titrating myself off of my SSRIs and ending completely stable, happy, fulfilled, and joyful. I want to be clear, I'm not saying someone should get off of their SSRIs, right? Every single person is on their own path, and those really, really served me for a time. But I am sharing this because I do believe that every single illness, even mental illness, is ultimately a product of misalignment with your soul's desire and your path and your truth, and then the world at large. And it's like this sort of disharmony between these like layers of yourself that ultimately manifest in physical illness. So that's why I actually kind of came to this philosophy very gradually and very slowly over decades of my life. But that summer, I finally freed myself from that. Not saying I never got depressed again, because I did, but then every time I did, I actually understood what was going on. And the only time that I got depressed again was when I felt back into the same pattern of suppression. And I'm sharing this with you now because the first part of building a legacy is not to start taking action. It's not to do anything other than understand yourself. Know yourself. Know who you are in your unique way. Let's keep going with this idea, okay? So when we're talking about building a legacy, we're talking about you as a unique individual creating something from yourself that's so completely aligned with you, as in your soul's purpose here on earth. That requires, first, a tremendous amount of self-knowledge. Lately, I've been really deconstructing and peeling away all of these labels that I've put on myself. I made a video a few months ago that was like, okay, like now that everyone's neurodivergent, can we not call ourselves that anymore? Like the labels that we put on ourselves a lot of times are like as though these are disabilities and these are like things that are wrong with you, are so ridiculous. Like a label that I've had is like, oh, depression. I have depression. It was a label that allowed me originally to validate my symptoms and be like, okay, wait, this is a real thing. I'm not insane for feeling like this. And I think a lot of our labels end up being like that. And I've labeled myself so many things, and sometimes I still do, to be honest with you. But like an example is like ADHD. Like I have been almost diagnosed ADHD. I've almost been diagnosed with autism. I have ultimately refused diagnoses because I have always kind of known that I didn't want a label to follow me around my whole life, but I've had several therapists be like, okay, like let's test you for this. And it's genetic. And I know like I've taken tests and like self-assessments, and like I know a lot of people have too. And people are very addicted to labels and saying like, oh, I have this and I have this. And like, for example, ADHD, I like to talk about a lot because I have a lot of my family with ADHD. I probably have ADHD. Like I said, I've never been formally diagnosed, but like my therapists have tried to diagnose me, if that makes sense. Like, so it's like, I pretty much, like, I definitely do. And I think like when we're talking about what that is, it's like, okay, you're saying you have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, meaning you can't sit in a chair for 8 hours a day and do the same thing. Like, look at our evolutionary history. I'm getting heated. Look at the evolution of human beings. Did we ever do that? For hundreds of thousands of years, did we ever sit in an office? No, that's a sickness. That's wrong. That's fundamentally misaligned with human nature. And then the same can be true for many other diagnoses. It's like, okay, I'm depressed, but like, oh, this is like such a fun fact, but it's like in the wild, animals, any other animal doesn't get depressed. The only time an animal gets depressed is when it's in captivity. Like that should tell you something, which hopefully I'm hoping and praying that my internet friend Brinley Searle will come on this podcast and we can talk about how we're in captivity. I'm actually going to reach out to her after this, but I really think that the point here is we are so quick to label ourselves with some broad category that's like creating a pathology, like a disorder, something wrong with you, and stacking those labels onto yourself to make yourself feel like relatable to people. Like, oh, okay, like I have ADHD, so XYZ, so I can't do this, so I can't do this, and this is how I am. Rather than knowing who you are, because the reason is every single label is a group of symptoms, that the reason behind those symptoms for every single individual is vastly, vastly different. Like an example is like, for example, if you, for example, have MTHFR, it's a genetic mutation. If you have that type of mutation where you can't methylate a lot of B vitamins, a lot of people end up feeling fatigued and having difficulty focusing, and they end up getting diagnosed with ADHD. But yes, they have the symptoms of ADHD, but why do they have those symptoms? Because they have a gene that can't methylate B vitamins. So they need B vitamins, not Adderall all of the time. Some people need Adderall to function at work. I take a natural Adderall to function in my grad school. That is how it is, and that's okay. But what I'm trying to argue here is it's time, once you pick up a label, understand the reason of the label. The reason is to validate something in you, and then let it go. Move beyond the label and understand you as a unique individual, who you actually are apart from these labels and constructs, because ultimately every label is isolating. Every single label is a cage. You are just a awareness, a self-awareness, having a temporary human experience. You're a eternal soul in a temporary human incarnation. Know thyself. Get to know yourself. Notice yourself when you're in a room alone. What do you do? What do you tend to turn to? An example could be like, for me, I noticed when I was really sad and I was grieving something, I would go to my phone and I would have this impulse to scroll. Or I noticed I would withdraw from people. Who are you? What do you do? What do you do, and how do you act? And then once you're aware of how you act and how you are, create and begin structuring your life for deeper self-knowledge and deeper self-awareness, sort of accommodating your life to meet your unique needs. For me, that came at a time, I think it was 2024-ish, which is like really late in my life. I was like 26, 27. And I was like, okay, I am here having a human experience. I'm having this experience, and I was starting to have a really intense spiritual awakening, to be honest with you, where I was experiencing like out of body sensations. I would like wake up in the night and not be in my physical body, but be fully conscious and be like walking around, but not be in my body. And I'd get freaked out and have to go back to my physical body and lay down and like merge my spirit, my etheric body, and my soul. My physical body. I had a very intense experience, and it got to the point where all of my sensory sensitivities at the time of the spiritual awakening, compounded by just like life stress, trauma, grief, all of that, made it so that I really couldn't function anymore. I was in full-time naturopathic medical school. I was really struggling to go to class. Like I would have to wear those loop earplugs in class. I would have to wear like blue light blocking glasses. I could barely go to the grocery store. I had misophonia, which is like when sounds really bother you so intensely. I like could barely survive. And at that time, when it got so severe and so bad and so debilitating, I could have labeled that burnout, and I did. It is burnout, right? I was burned out. But beyond the burnout, it's like, okay, then what? Then it became like not life or death, but it was like sink or swim. Know yourself, meet your needs, or like you're gonna fail. So I began understanding the way my brain worked, my unique brain worked. Like I stopped listening to external advice, like, oh, like you need to be studying 8 hours a day and you need to do this and that. And I understood, no, the way I work with my unique structure of brain, I will hyper focus for 2 to 4 hours. And I will have this great stretch of work, and I will do more than what the average person will do in 16 hours. And then I'm off. I can't work halfway. I can't do this. Like this works for me and this doesn't. And I found that for myself, me as a unique individual. And what I'm encouraging you to do is to do the same. Like you know yourself. Come to the recognition of yourself. What do you need? How do you work? And then do that without compromising. Do that without compromising. The first step of building your legacy is knowing yourself and meeting your needs without compromising. The second step is to understand what you want to do in the world, right? You don't have to know the extent of it, but you have to kind of come into awareness of this classic saying. It's like, what are your strengths? What do you love to do? Looking back usually at childhood, unless you had a extremely traumatic childhood, which is so valid, and then this part doesn't apply to you, and there are other ways you can contact this aspect of yourself. But what did you always love? What were you interested in? What are your strengths? You're not going to know the answer to that without step one, right? You have to know yourself first. what are your strengths, and then come to terms with what are your gifts, what are your strengths, and then what does the world need, and where do those two overlap? For me, my legacy, my work is, my strength is pattern recognition. I knew that from a very young age. My also strength, I love merging art and science. I love philosophical and esoteric thought, but I also love science. So I pursued this degree in naturopathic medicine, but while doing this degree, I'm also working for myself, where I'm merging the subconscious mind and hair tissue mineral analysis, as well as a genetic analysis. So I'm merging and designing remineralization protocols and helping people with complex chronic disease while addressing their subconscious minds and the subconscious element of their conditions. That is my strength. Another element, which I guess I'll circle back to, is Half Moon Academy. So it's this podcast, but it's also a virtual school. And we have this program called the Spiral Studies, where it is my own unique philosophical framework that I created through Gnosis, which is basically direct download, but also because of my study, reading so many books in esoteric studies and Hermeticism, and understanding like the truth that as above, so below, as within, so without, that truth is this pattern that's not monodimensional, but rather intersecting all planes of existence. So I help people now in group settings really connect with their own purpose and their own legacy through the spiral studies by understanding what unconscious beliefs are holding them back from reality, and then how can you change that unconscious belief and then create a new reality? It's my own metaphor. Honestly, actually, quick side note is, if you're listening to this before February 12th, 2026, I have a free spiral seminar that's coming up on that day, and it's going to be live and recorded. And honestly, whenever you're listening to this, feel free to check out my website in the show notes, and you can go ahead and see if I have a spiral seminar coming up. Maybe I have a recorded one you can watch, and I highly, highly recommend looking at that if you're interested in learning more about how you can build your legacy in a deeper way beyond just this podcast. But for me, I understood I'm really good at teaching. And I'm not saying that from an egotistical place. I'm saying it I was really bad at teaching, right? I became an educator. I have a master's degree in education. I learned from the hardest way possible, which is teaching high schoolers in Los Angeles, how to become a really good educator. And now I have this strength, and I'm merging this with my love of teaching, my love of community building, and then esoteric studies, and then what the world needs, which is people to help them find their own path and their own legacy. So step 2 is find out what you love to do, and then what the world needs. A side note here is that, again, I always like to base this in human evolutionary history. Every single human grew up in tribes, and we only had civilization for about 10,000 years. So what we need to do and understand is everybody plays a really different role in society. There are people that will want to teach, like me, they'll want to share. And for me, it's not even that I want to, it's it is my soul's purpose. I feel an energy stuck in my throat unless I'm speaking. Honestly, I'm pretty introverted, and I wouldn't really want to be a public speaker in any way, but I do it because I have to, okay? That's a legacy. That's a purpose where it's beyond you. It's outside of you. Sometimes your purpose is just to be a mother or a partner or a friend, or to, weave baskets by the river and, harvest your garden. That can be your legacy. There's no pressure for you to make something so big. And actually, another quick caveat, I've been thinking so often on the internet, sometimes if I'm scrolling through, maybe this is just because I do create content myself, but it'll be the most important thing you can do is make a TikTok account and start posting every day and get 10,000 followers and this and that, and post 3 times a day, 20 times a day. And I don't think that's true at all. I don't think that's true at all whatsoever. And I'm saying that as someone who does make content. I think that the only thing you should be doing and concerning yourself with is following your legacy. What do you actually want to do? And then think creatively and understand that, again, back to zero before we started, this idea of like within everything is the seed of everything. Like we can filter through all of this information entering our unconscious mind and we can create new paths forward. There's so much more information than what we're aware of, right? So for you, maybe you want to, I don't know, I can't think of an idea right now. Maybe you want to create like herbal tinctures. You don't have to be on the internet. You can create your own store. You can be at the farmer's market and then you can go to different shops in your local town and you can like maybe go into a grocery store one day if you really want to think really big, and then maybe it gets into like Whole Foods or Lazy Acres and it's all around like California. I don't know. But I'm saying here that there's so many other ways to do things, and when you're following your path, things really do ultimately align for you. Okay, step 3. Also, like, I don't know if you can see, I don't have any notes. I'm just thinking off the dome here, but it's been something like simmering in my mind all week. So step 3, I'm going to say like trusting the path as it's laid out before you. There is this tendency that we have as humans where we're, I guess, like, how do I put this? We think that the story's over before it's over. It's so bizarre to me, and I do it too. Where it's like, I guess I'll use an example from my life. It's like kind of embarrassing, but it's like an ex, okay? So I had this ex, I broke up with him, and then I regretted it like 4 months later. Okay, after that, when he wanted nothing to do with me, I was like, no, like, how could it be? The story was so beautiful, and then it's just over. How could that be the story? If it's not a good story, the story's not over. Why do we put time frames on God? Right? So then, like, literally 4 years later, we ended up reconnecting. It was a beautiful reconnection. We resolved a lot of the things between us. We did not get back together because at that time we were both completely evolved different people. Caveat again, every single time you have a breakup or you have something not go through, maybe it's a job, you get fired, maybe like, I don't know, you crash your car. I've crashed my car. I've gone through horrible breakups. I haven't gotten fired. I hope I never do. Well, now I work for myself, so unless I fire myself. But every single thing actually does fit together, but you have to decide for it to fit together. And that's based on your mindset, okay? And your awareness of your little tiny place within a larger collective. Take your ego out of it and understand the story is not over. So in that case, it's like the story ultimately ended up fitting together for me in a way that made perfect sense. And I literally thank God every single day for every breakup I've gone through. And I've been like, oh, I literally am genuinely sighing of relief because who you are is so sacred. And when you're partnering with people, it's like you're tethering your energy to them. And you can only rise to a certain level before it becomes a frequency mismatch and it has to collapse. So ultimately, people end up keeping themselves small to stay into relationships just so that they don't have to be alone and face their true soul's purpose. An example again is like I totaled my car. For that was a little bit different because I crashed my car while I was listening to a manifestation track, visualizing having a new car. My eyes were open, don't worry. But I got into a 3-car pileup on the 5. I was in the middle. It was a disaster. And I ended up getting over double what my car was worth in insurance, and I got a completely new car. But it took a month from me totaling my car to me getting money, and I had to walk around town and like have my friends drive me, and I was so upset and I was so negative about it, and I was like, oh, the worst things happen to me. What's gonna happen? Da 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 da. No, like literally every single time anything bad happens to you, you get the arbitrary decision. Is this going to be good? Am I going to decide that this is good, or am I going to decide that it's bad? Because again, your brain's filtering through everything and it's just sending the information along a neural pathway. It's like bad, bad, bad if you're used to thinking that it's bad. And then if you're used to thinking it's good, it says good. And then all of these little micro decisions, these micro habits, it's like confirmation bias, but manifesting, right? You're going to be more aware if you're thinking good of all the good things. And then that's going to lead you along the path, making decisions and allowing your life to build, right? It's literally very, very logical when it comes down to it. Okay, so trust the things happening as they happen. Every single thing fits together. Every single thing. I know from my own life, and I've had years where it's horrible and it's so hard. And honestly, I've probably had lifetimes where it's horrible and hard, if I'm being real with you. But it comes down to, what are you deciding? I first learned about manifesting 2016, which is funny because 2016 is like trending right now. But that was when I learned about don't chase, attract. Like, what else did I learn? Like, what you think about expands. What you think about expands. That's like a huge principle. And I began writing down my manifestations. Okay, I'll tell you another little story. I guess it's like a story time today. But I wrote down this whole visualization, and it was like, I walk and I run along the cliffs in the ocean, and I go to this yoga studio where I can see the beach, and then I go to medical school and I'm in class this time to this time, and then I go meet up with friends, and I scripted this whole day and visualized myself, and literally visualized myself running along cliffs. Okay. I then ended up finishing college, leaving pre-med. Like, I finished a biochemistry undergrad. Like, I did all the pre-med prerequisites, but I didn't take the MCAT. And I ended up not knowing what to do at all, and then becoming a teacher in Los Angeles, and then getting a master's degree while teaching full-time during the pandemic. Like, it was really horrible. I can't emphasize enough. Like, I actually genuinely cannot emphasize enough how challenging this was. Like, it was the hardest year of my life. You would have to pay me in the millions for me to do that year again. Like, I'm not kidding. I actually almost freaking went bald. Like, I lost so much hair. I had gray hairs and I was 22. I'm literally 29 now and I have no gray hairs anymore. Like, I reversed them. I was that stressed that I had gray hairs and almost was bald. Like, my hair was thinning. Like, I was miserable. I don't know how to explain it. I have this quality in me, though, that it's like this tenacity. And at that time, like, so many of my colleagues ended up quitting their jobs. I didn't. Okay. I stayed. I got COVID so severely, I was actually debilitated. I couldn't take a walk, even a block, for over a month of my life. My lungs were completely destroyed. But then through me getting COVID so severely, I ultimately ended up going to a naturopathic doctor who helped me change my life. And then that ended up putting me on the path to then apply and go to naturopathic medical school. Okay, how does that even fit together still? Then I ultimately go to naturopathic medical school. I'm living in LA, right? I don't want to leave California, so I apply to school in San Diego, early decision. I get in, and I end up living on the beach, running along cliffs, going to yoga studio where I could see the beach, like literally living out my scripted life from 2016. Make that make sense. And now, what I do now is so much better. And now I understand why I had to be a teacher. Because after being a teacher, I literally was like, why was I a teacher? I never wanted to be a teacher. I'm so confused. Like, how did I even have that experience? Now I'm like, oh, that's why. So trust the path before you. Every single thing fits together. Every single job you have, it has this skill set that will then be used. Nothing is wasted unless you decide to waste it. Okay, let's keep going. I was reviewing like this book, it's called Bach Flower Therapy, Theory and Practice by Mechtheld Scheffer. Sorry if I said that wrong, but I was rereading the intro this morning, and it was talking about, basically, if you're unfamiliar with this idea of Bach flower remedies, essentially it was this doctor in the 1800s, and he was very demoralized by what the medical practice looked like. He was like, I'm just doing these things that are invasive and like no one's really getting better. Like, why are people even sick in the first place? And it led him down this philosophy where he ended up, again, through direct gnosis, meaning like a channel came to him, and he ended up doing this work with flowers. He would harvest flowers, have them in water, and have this whole process where essentially he would transfer the energy of the flower into the water. And what the idea of Bach flower therapy is it's like transferring the energy from the flower into a liquid that then you can consume. And the idea here is that because humans kind of co-evolved with plants and with flowers, like the energy of the flower can repair some of the misalignment of your soul. We're getting a little out there today. Yeah, Bach flower therapy is an esoteric thing. But if you've experienced it for yourself, you know it can be tremendously powerful. So in this little section, it was talking about like familiarizing yourself with the different remedies, because there are 38 remedies that Bach did, and like the rest of this book is like describing each remedy. So an example would be like one remedy, you might be very angry and agitated, and you might have these certain qualities to you, and every single remedy looks different, and each remedy based on its manifestation is like a different like misalignment with you and your soul. So it asks like yourself basically giving instruction for then you going about basically practicing Bach flower therapies. But what's cool about this little section is like you can use this and apply this to building your own legacy, especially if part of your work is helping. Okay, here's the quote. Choosing a quiet moment, it is important to ask yourself, why do I wish to help others? What are my motives? Is it truly only to serve my neighbor? Or what other motives do I have? There may be a desire to shine, to have influence, or a need to make more contacts. Or perhaps you have found an untapped market. The more these and other limiting personal motives are to the fore, they are of course always present to some degree, the poorer will be the results in the long run, because your actions are not guided by the higher self, in this case, according to spiritual laws. So kind of rephrasing this in more simple terms, if you need that, is basically saying, okay, well, why do I even want to help people? Is it actually just because I want to be of service? Or do I want to have influence? I want to shine. Like I found this market. I can make a bunch of money. This author clarifies like that is always going to be there to some degree, right? We're humans. We're dual. We're going to have these egos. But what it's saying is that the more that they're present and like the less aware of them you are, your results will not be good in the long run. Oh my gosh, I almost have to sneeze. And it's basically saying, this is because your actions are not guided by your higher self. And it's kind of saying, like, framing it again, according to spiritual laws. Maybe we're at step 4 right now, but I'm not going to call it step 4. I'm going to kind of close it out here. The truth is, you are here in any regard to be of service. I'm not really sure why, if I'm being honest with you. I don't have the answer for that. I don't have the answer for why we're here, why it's hard here. But what I do believe is that you came to Earth, which is one of the most dense planes because it's only in the 3rd and 4th dimensional plane. And if we're thinking of the number line and how many numbers there are, 3 and 4 is pretty down low. So we're in a pretty dense plane. And you have your higher self, which I believe is existing on other higher dimensional planes. It's like these aspects of your consciousness that are outside of space and time. Okay. Your job here is not to plan, not to do anything, not to act. Ultimately, your job here is to maintain your alignment with your higher self and your soul, and to trust the influence and guidance. Once you have made contact, right, with these elements of yourself and understanding like how that then overlaps with what the world needs. And then you trust that everything's fitting together in the long run, that you're not like holding on to this attachment and this idea of like, it has to be like this. Like, why isn't it working? Right? If I, when I was a teacher, was like, I wanted to be a doctor. What am I doing? And then I understand, oh, I actually didn't want to be a medical doctor. I wanted to become a naturopathic doctor, and I wanted to do my own work, and I wanted to do this. Like, I trusted through the challenge with this tenacity that everything would fit together, and it has. And even if things now aren't perfect and they're not like, I'm not at like the peak of my career right now, like, I know with such confidence because I've tried and I've tested and I've seen with my own two eyes, everything does in fact fit together. And now it's your turn. Now you understand that the reason things become obvious to you, things become apparent. Like, sorry, now I'm feeling my cold coming on, so I'm trying to wrap this up here, but the reason that things become apparent to you is because it's like you have to then act. God doesn't do it for you. Pretty much ever. I mean, sometimes he does, if I'm being honest, but like long term, no. There's this story that I think people say quite a bit where it's like a guy's basically drowning in the ocean. And someone comes and they throw him a life, what's it called? What's that called? A buoy? I'll just say a buoy. They throw him a buoy and they're like, catch the buoy, like, we'll save you. And he's like, no, like, I'm trusting God will save me. And then another boat comes and they're like trying to get him and he's like, no, like, I'm drowning, but I'm trusting God will save me. And then a helicopter comes and they try to save him. And then he's like, no, God is going to save me. And then he dies. And he asks God, what? I trusted you to save me. And you didn't. And God's like, I sent 2 boats and a helicopter. Like, what more could I have done? You have to hold out your hand. You have to hold on to the buoy. You have to have your eyes open and look, what is God sending you? And then say yes. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you dreamed you were going to get a helicopter rescue and airlifted out, but then you get a canoe coming your way, get in the canoe. You get that metaphor? Does that make sense? Like, trust that it doesn't have to be perfect now and that it does fit together. And through the consistent choice of your rational optimism, everything does fit together. I started this idea with this idea of like, you basically live this life for a very short amount of time. You're only here for a little while. And in December, I went to a training called neural manipulation, and I received such deep, intensive energy work on my nervous system, and I came home and I got sicker than I've ever been in my life. I had a 104, 105 fever for 5 days straight, and then on the 5th day, I stepped outside and I sat in the grass and I asked God, why am I not getting better? And I realized at that time that the boundaries I had structured for my life, the way that I was like forcing myself to constantly be working and grinding and making content and doing all this stuff and like forcing my way into my future and my legacy, was creating a life for myself that I didn't want to return to. So my body was rebelling in such a loud and obvious way. Trust the guidance of your body because it will speak to you, and it will speak to you at the volume that you will listen. So for me, it had to get pretty freaking loud. So I listened and I said in my mind, I choose when I'm better to create a life for myself where I can rest and I can really enjoy my life, and I will not have to force my way into the future. And I cut back on quite a few things. Literally within 3 hours, the fever broke. And the next day I was like 60% better. So I'm sharing this with you because of the understanding that the truth is, life is really short. I know from experience with people that I love dying, and with conversations I've had with friends, even my friend Shelly today, who was talking about when people come to the end of their lives, the only thing that they wanted to do was live in their purpose. Life is short, and unless you take conscious change, like you take conscious action again and again and again for years at a time to change the neural pathways that you're engaging in and changing the outlook you have on life and changing the outcome of your life by choosing to be aligned with your legacy, with your decisions, with the reason that you're here, with living in your soul's purpose, you will come to the end of your life and you will see the time that you've wasted. Please, for the sake of your own soul, for the sake of humanity, take the time you need to know yourself and know whatever you want. I have said this before, but I'm going to say it again. This idea that the earth is maintaining homeostasis, which if you know homeostasis, basically it's like your ability to stay stable and alive. So for me, for a human body, it's like your ability for your body to keep an average temperature and keep all of its functions running and bring itself back into balance. So if I jump into icy cold water, my body's going to produce more heat. Does that make sense? It's homeostasis, it's balance. So for you and for us and for the collective, the earth itself is maintaining homeostasis. In the spring, dandelions grow, and dandelions are good for your liver and for your kidneys and for detoxing. In our own physical bodies, we need to detox after the winter. So these plants grow with this intelligence of the earth in alignment and in coherence with what we need. That's the earth being a conscious living organism itself and bringing itself back into balance, right? Think about dandelions. They grow in fields that have been sprayed with pesticides, which are toxic, right? So it's like they give us what we need unconsciously. Similarly, the decisions that you make for your life, the desire that you have for your life. Maybe you literally desire to be like a fashion designer or like a singer. That is equally valuable as someone that wants to be like a nurse, right? Every single person has a unique desire and all of it fits together to bring the earth back into balance. The only time it can't go back into balance is if we aren't all following our paths and the things that we love. So trust your desire, trust your path, listen to your body, and live in alignment with your dreams. Thank you so much for staying to the end of this episode today. I want to encourage you that if you liked it, if you resonated, maybe you could leave a 5-star review. If you have any questions for me or anything that stood out to you, leave a comment and I'd love to respond to it and continue this conversation. And as always, if you haven't yet signed up for the Free Spiral Seminar that's happening February 12th, you can go ahead and do so. Again, that's linked in the show notes, but I will see you next week. I can't remember what I'm talking about next week, but I think it's more about constructs. And then we have some more guests coming on this season, so I'm really excited for that. But until then, have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will talk to you soon.